The world wants you to conform to its values, beliefs, priorities. But God wants you to live life His way and to become what He wants you to be and your children to be. And welcome to another episode of Inspiring Courageous Faith. Glad you've joined us again. This is the YouTube channel that gives you courage in life's most important relationships: God, friends, marriage, raising children, and relating to your adult children after they become adults. As we begin, let me just ask you a couple of questions. What are you facing right now that's creating stress and pressure in your life? If you're a single man, what fears or concerns are you encountering that demand courage and faith? I know that a lot of single guys struggle with fear. As a single woman, what is your greatest fear you're facing right now? Are you experiencing circumstances that you feel like they're dangerously moving toward being out of control? If that's what you're feeling, I've got a great story and some lessons for you today. And I'd like to encourage you to become a subscriber if you're not already, so you will stay tuned for the practical help we have coming that will stiffen your backbone with courage. If you've watched and listened to the first episode on handling pressure, you'll recall that I shared an incredible story about the adventure of Double Eagle 2, the first manned balloon flight all the way across the Atlantic from America, landing in Europe, facing tons of ice building up on their 10-story balloon and ultimately pushing them down toward the ocean. Well, they ultimately tossed everything they had overboard, including a hang glider they were going to take off on the balloon to land in France, where near Limburg had landed decades ago. Well, I'm going to share with you today how stress and pressure are impacting people's lives, marriages, families, and I'll give you some thought-provoking exercises that you can do to easily complete as a single person, as a couple, as a parent, a project that will help you make wise and courageous decisions that enable you to navigate the pressures that you're facing in your life. But first, I want to share with you a story, and I've got a copy of it right here in my Bible. A copy of the story that I clipped out of the Denver Post. And you'll see it says there, "Hello, Columbia." And it's got a picture of a guy in a lawn chair and 45 weather balloons, and then back safely on the ground. It's quite a story. His name was Larry Walters. He rigged those 45 weather balloons to a Sears lawn chair, presumably for what was going to be a short flight near Long Beach, California. Needless to say, the self-proclaimed pilot of that lawn chair didn't quite have the preparation or the training that our transatlantic crew had for the Double Eagle 2. Before taking off, Larry did strap on a parachute, carried a pellet gun in his pocket, and buckled himself into that lawn chair and had 45 helium balloons that were attached and tethered to a rope to the ground, and a handful of friends that were supposed to hold on to those ropes. Well, his friends let go, and the rope that was tethering that lawn chair to the ground broke, and Larry Walters and his flying lawn chair broke loose and shot upwards fast. Minutes later, Walters was calling for help on a CB radio, where a Delta airliner over Southern California had spotted his flying lawn chair at 16,000 feet. Walters was getting numb due to the chilly temperatures at that altitude. So he used his pellet gun to begin to shoot out various balloons, and it allowed him and his flying lawn chair to glide down slowly, and as God would have it, until the ropes became entangled in a power line, and clearly by an act of God, Walters dangled 5 feet above the ground and was able to get down safely. Later, Walters said to the police, "Since I was 13 years old, I've dreamed of going up in the clear blue sky in a weather balloon. By the grace of God, I fulfilled my dream." But then he added, "I wouldn't do this again for anything." And he said one other thing, too. He said, "I would be happy to endorse Sears lawn chairs." Well, Sears is out of business, so he's not going to have that. I've had that newspaper clipping since it made the news on July 3rd, 1982. I kept that clipping because even though the pace in the early 80s and 90s was not what it is today, even back then it was a challenge. It was fierce for Barbara and me as we sought to balance all the demands of two very different people, male and female, while leading a fast-growing enterprise, a nonprofit, and hung on to God as we navigated raising our six in an increasingly decadent, pressure-filled culture. At times, we were so busy that we felt like that guy on that lawn chair. We were out of control, gaining altitude rapidly, growing numb as we reached those altitudes far too many times. The pace of life for 4 teenagers we had at once was mind-numbing. The moral pressures were a very real danger on them, but also on us. Peer pressure came from all kinds of places. Their church youth group and their parents put pressure on us. It was safe to say that church youth group wasn't quite the safety spot that we had hoped it would be. Felt like many times too many activities were crowding out family. And adding to that, dating, getting driver's licenses, fender benders, not just 1 or 2, but several with 6 kids. Then the emergence of the internet, social media, and finally cell phones, and finally sending them off to college. And did I mention the fender benders? Yeah, we had one child who backed into more mailboxes than I could count. And let me add this, just a conclusion I came to, no extra charge for this. When a child turns 16, call your auto insurance broker and just give him your checkbook. Tell him to keep it handy. Teenage drivers are a challenge. The stress of raising all 6 of our children through what Barbara and I believe are among the most dangerous days our children will ever face was relentless. On us as parents, on them as children attempting to grow up. Fortunately, Barbara and I had gone away for a weekend 6 or 7 years earlier, and we'd had some stimulating conversations, some people might call it arguments, about how we were going to manage all that we knew that was going to be coming at us and the stress that we couldn't have anticipated. I designed a project for both Barbara and me to work through to discuss and ultimately decide what our core values were. A core value is our convictions. Those things are important that we wanted to give priority to and build into our lives as a couple as well as into our children individually, and then finally to our family collectively. Decisions about where we would spend our time, what we would spend our money on, are both a reflection of what our real values are and what is truly important. I'll never forget a breakfast I had with then Governor Frank White. He said this. He said, "Dennis, to say that you don't have enough time is not a statement of fact, but a judgment of value." That statement has proved its way through our lives, all the way from raising kids to now having children who are adult, to now having adult children that we relate to. As difficult as it was, I'm convinced that clarifying our values as a pair of parents was the most significant thing we did to prepare for the daily downpour of choices that we and our kids would face in the teen years. But the project we did as individuals clarified how different we are and how we complement one another in our marriage and as parents as we raise our children. I want to explain to you a little bit later where you can find this core values project, but let me just explain to you what Barbara and I did. Amos 3:3 says, "How can two walk together unless they be agreed?" And so I prepared a project where I gave Barbara a sheet of paper and I took one myself, and we both wrote down our top 10 values that we wanted to build into their lives and our family. We did that separately from one another. Then after a time being, we got back together and we brought her list and my list together, and I told her she had to whittle hers down to the top 5. I did the same. And then we had to take those 2 top 5 lessons, merge them together in what became our top 5 agreed upon core values. Now I'm going to share with you what we came up with. And this was for us. You undoubtedly will have your own core values because you're different people. But we just tried to look at the Bible and what the Bible says and what Jesus taught. And where we started was where he went to when he was asked in Matthew chapter 22, verses 37 through 40, "What's the greatest commandment of all, Jesus?" And he said, "Love God and love others." So our first core value that we hammered out was love God and obey Him and represent Him as individuals, as a family. A second one was found in one of the other Gospels, Matthew chapter 28, 19 and 20. It's called the Great Commission. And they don't call it the Great Commission for no reason. The Great Commission talks about going, therefore, to the world and making disciples, teaching them what Christ taught. And that's what Christianity is. It's not a bunch of rules and regulations. It's a relationship with Jesus and getting to know Him through this book, the Bible, the bestseller of all time, and passing those on to our kids, as well as living them out ourselves. The third core value was respecting all people and valuing them as image bearers, having been made in the image of God. I don't think we could say enough about this in this day of discrimination. We need to be relating to one another, respecting how God has made different people with different gifts and different backgrounds. A fourth core value that we hammered out was develop relationships God's way. And by the way, this was one of my 5 that I brought to our list. Developing relationships God's way. That included how we resolve conflict with one another, how to ask for forgiveness, how to grant forgiveness, and what is forgiveness anyway. And then number 5 was Barbara's. And this is what she brought to our list at 5. Teach our kids the value of hard work and the work ethic. You can look at those lists, and they are pretty comprehensive. But it was a great place for us to start as a couple as we left that getaway that we were on and just talked about how we would make decisions going forward. One of the things that the list pointed out is that Barbara and I are very different. She wanted to teach the kids how to work. Now, why would she say that? Because her grandfather worked until he died at 99 years of age. On the other hand, I like to have a lot of fun. So I wanted to build relationships in our family and have some good experiences and have a lot of fun. So we brought those two together, and you're not going to change Barbara's and you're not going to change mine, but we tried to work out how we would make decisions based upon Those two values, but the other three as well. Was work wrong? No. Barbara's won me over our lifetime together, more than 52 years. Work is redemptive. She's convinced me of that. It teaches us how to deny ourselves and how to serve our employer and add value to his company or to the ministry or to the church. Does that mean relationships are the right choice for one of our core values, top 5? Yes, it means it's the right one for us. You know, I've really thought a lot about this because of what this did for us. This enabled us to make choices well into the teenage years and beyond about decisions we had to make of how we'd go on vacation, what we'd spend our time and money on. And it really helped us kind of clarify. I'm going to share with you a great illustration of this as we conclude here in a moment. There's a problem today, though. I think far too many people who profess to be followers of Christ have really never determined what they believe. What are their core convictions? And if we can't articulate our core convictions that impact our choices, then I think that's a problem in a marriage or in a family. I think far too many of us have what I call near beliefs. They're not true bedrock beliefs or convictions that we'd live for or die for, but they're kind of whimsical. We can decide to do it or not to. One of the core convictions I came to as a father of our family and having 4 daughters, and we'll talk more about this in future YouTube episodes, is I came to the conclusion that I wanted to interview the young men who came to take our daughters out. Now, I started telling our daughters about this when they were 4, 5, and 6, when I dated them and took them on dates. And so they thought it was kind of cool then. So by the time we got to the 15, 16, 17, in that age range, and boys began to show up, we had a lot of good-looking daughters, and they were courageous enough to come and ask to meet with me. And I had some great conversations. I'll share with you more about that in a future episode. But I believe that was a really big step in teaching our daughters the kind of men to look for, and also calling young men up today, because we're not calling them up to a high enough standard, I don't think. The world today doesn't need another copy of itself. In fact, I think one of the great words that we need to be practicing with our teens and in our marriages and families is the word no. No, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to go there. No, you're not going to do that. I actually had somebody give me a T-shirt that I looked but couldn't find. It's a T-shirt that says, exactly what part of the word no do you not understand? Teens will push back on the word no. I heard a comment that Dr. Bino Schmidt, who was president, I believe, of Yale University, addressing the freshman class of some students that were starting at that Ivy League university. And he said this, he said, a statement of your convictions will deny you the liberty of losing your identity to the herd. And I've thought often about that. That's not just true for freshmen in college, but it's true for all of us in our marriage, our family, our neighborhoods, our business. You know what you believe. You're not going to be a chameleon, and it'll save you a lot of stress and pressure from comparing yourself with what others are doing. And a great illustration of this comes in parenting. Barbara and I experienced with one of our middle daughters, Rebecca, and some choices we made to step away from kind of a treadmill she was on in gymnastics. And some of you have heard me share this story, but Rebecca wanted to move from, I believe it was level 6 to level 7. And so Barbara and I talked about it, and she thought she ought to move up to level 7. Now, You don't know a lot about my wife, Barbara, yet, but you will in the future. She's still going to seminary right now and finishing courses, and she'll finally complete that in about 12 months, and then she's going to come on these YouTube episodes and add her perspective, which I think you need to hear. But Barbara disagreed with me. She's competitive. She wanted our daughter to excel. I think she actually thought our daughter could be an Olympian. Well, Rebecca's a sweet girl, and she is athletic, but she's no Olympian. And so I looked at that, and I weighed the amount of time that was going to take, 4 days a week with a 30-minute commute down there to take her and drop her off for a 2 or 3 hour practice. And then at the end of the practice, drive 30 minutes back home. And I told Barbara, I said, we believe the family is important. We're going to take Rebecca and me out of our family 4 days, 4 evenings a week. And I think this is not playing to a strength of what we've got going right now. If she had been an Olympian, I don't know what I would have decided, because people got to make a decision around the giftedness and the likes of their children. But I dug my heels in and didn't change. But guess what? Barbara didn't either. And so for 4 months, we had little spot conversations about it. We'd get away for another retreat and talk about it more than just a spot. And she wasn't budging. And I wasn't either, because I thought childhood is vanishing. We'll talk more about that in a future episode too. But childhood's vanishing today, and children are not being allowed to be children long enough and just play and have fun. And far too serious. And so over a 4-month period, I prayed and I asked God, I said, if I'm wrong, change me. But if Barbara needs to change, then you go to work on her, because I can't. And all I can say is about month 4 or 5, somewhere in there, Barbara began to soften, and she came over to my side. Not easily. Her heels were dug in pretty deep, but she loved her daughters, and she wanted them to compete. And I wanted us to be a family, and I didn't want us to be ripped apart by sporting events. Our core values helped us isolate what was the issue here. Barbara felt strongly about her position. I felt strongly about mine. When you know what you believe, it eliminates certain pressures and stress on you and frees you up to be the person God made you to be. For instance, if you know what your values are and what you're going to do, won't do, you're not going to waffle when the wind blows stiffly in your face and trying to move you off of those things you stand for. I think one of the great challenges today is for people to pull out of all of the activity and to put their feet down firmly and say, here's where I stand. Here's who I am. And in all kinds of areas, at work, in dating, in marriage, in family, and you're not going to waffle one way or the other. Knowing what you believe can prevent stress in your life, because I'm going to tell you something. Doing what's wrong and doing something against your principles will create stress. I promise you. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 20, explains that you and I are in a fierce, unseen, spiritual battle between the world, the devil, who is real. Jesus spoke about him a great deal, and the flesh. The world wants you to conform to its values, beliefs, priorities, and its convictions. But God wants you to live life His way and to become what He wants you to be and your children to be. And listen to me, do what He has uniquely gifted and called you and your children to do. Will you ask God to give you wisdom as you lead your family? Wisdom is skill in everyday living. We're going to unpack that in the next episode of Inspiring Courageous Faith. But I can promise you, we're going to look into this idea of what wisdom is. It's living life God's way. And if you'll subscribe to our podcast, Inspiring Courageous Faith, and just click the box below, you're going to be finding out a lot of ways that you can add definition to your convictions. Then if you like what you've heard today, you could click 2 more boxes, the like box that you liked it, and then leave a brief comment about what you're taking away today. While you're at it, hit the share button and send this to a friend or a buddy that needs to benefit from this. And if you're single, get along with a kindred spirit friend, if nothing else, just for the accountability of it. And both of you individually hammer out your top 10 core values, what you really believe, and what are the standards you're going to live for. And maybe you can sharpen one another's top 5. Just speak into their lives and encourage them, as well as hold them accountable to keep the top 5 they have. And if you're married, I've explained how you can use this in your marriage and in your family. I think this is a great way for a couple to merge together, even as you follow Christ and read the Scripture, and make a list. Practically flesh it out as to what your top 5 values are and how you're going to raise your kids and live your lives as a family. I'm Dennis Rainey, and that's the kind of inspiring, courageous faith you're going to receive here on this YouTube channel. Come join us again for another edition. I appreciate you watching.
Go to therainey's.org/podcast for more inspiring, courageous faith content.